Welcome in to another edition, an annual show that we have done for. I've been so bad at it, I've forgotten how many we've done. But it is the 2023 prediction show. As you can see on your screen, the band is back together again. I guess we got together a couple weeks ago or last week and did the over-under. Pushed back to today because of the events on campus. Had a vigil in the Smith Center for the professor and the students and all dealing with that. So we hope that tonight we can give you a little bit of a relief from that and have a little fun on the season prediction show. But do not forget what happened in Chapel Hill on Monday. It's a problem that we need to see fixed at some point. But anyway, Buck Sanders, Greg Barnes, Taylor Viplis, Jason Staples, John Bauman, and myself, Tommy Ashley, of course, sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Gentlemen, let's get right into it. And, Buck, you are on the center of my screen. I want to know right out the gate, how excited are you to make a name for yourself in this show right here as we get started?
Hey, well, hang on, Buck. Let me interrupt here.
Oh, wow. It's already
Absolutely.
begun.
I think this is important. A lot of kudos needs to go to the victors of last year, right? And there's two things. One is, and correct me if I'm wrong here, John, but Taylor and Buck both picked Carolina to go 9-3 in the regular season. So props to that. Buck gets credit, additional credit, extra credit for picking Carolina to win the Coastal. Taylor gets extra credit for picking Clemson to win the ACC. So those are two impressive performances. And truth be told, we all did a pretty good job. I think there were a couple 7-5s, and I won't call anybody's name out. But other than that, I think everybody was within a game of the final margin. So pretty solid all around.
Well, let me throw this in. Tyler Woods, right out the gate, $10 says it was Greg Barnes that was late. And no, Greg was actually on time. You know, Greg is, when it's raining, you can't be on the golf course. So
we won't mention who it was, will we, Jason?
Yeah, it was me.
Jason is,
and I had just in my defense, I did have Carolina going to the ACC title game last year too. So
okay, there's credit there.
But I did have them going 8-4. So
didn't I have Carolina 10-2 last year? That would have been an ACC championship game. Yeah, I mean, and then one
over
more
the
comment.
last 2 years, though. However, John,
That's right.
Buck Sanders
who is
of
the overall winner of this little contest?
Well, I have this prepared.
Nobody even wanted to bring that up.
People say you're only as good as your last year, though. So we were both 8-4 last year.
What have
this
you
is
done for
this
me
is
lately?
relevant though.
Yeah.
Look at John Grisham on the screen. This is relevant, folks. I was peer pressured into that. Anyway,
I have this all prepared. This turned into the most stressful thing I've ever done in my professional or personal life, putting this
And
together.
I don't understand it whatsoever, and I've looked at it for a week.
Okay, so let me explain it. There's two metrics by which we judge the success of the picks, and our sample size is the last 2 seasons. We threw out the COVID year because the schedule changed. And before that, I think this was recorded around a ham radio or something. There's no record of it. So we just are looking at the last 2 seasons. In terms of pick, win, loss, pick accuracy, Buck Sanders is in first place. He has 16 correct picks and 8 incorrect picks. But there's a second metric here, difference in overall record. So the best way to explain this, Tommy picked UNC to go 12-0 in 2021. They did not go 12-0. He was 6 off the final record. So in terms of difference in overall record, Buck and Greg are tied for first place there. So that's your rundown, and we have this year's board, fresh, clean slate, ready to get things going for the 2023 season.
now we're doing confidence intervals this year, as we discussed last year, right?
I can't remember yesterday.
Get your 30% and your 20%.
Yeah.
You can do that. You could do
You got
that.
to commit.
I think this team's got a
And
22% chance to win.
no Waffle House if Tez plays, if he doesn't play.
Well, I'm already saying if Tez plays, my prediction is different than if he doesn't.
Lord
just
have mercy.
Caveating that all up front. Are we all operating under the assumption that he plays or not? Let's just go with that.
I don't know. I'm going to operate that it doesn't matter. And I'm going to live that way at least until Saturday night.
I guess I'm going to assume he's not going to play just for, I don't know. I guess
Just
I'm
based
negative.
on the NCAA's track record.
Right, exactly. Pessimistic.
Yeah, so yeah, and we're picking these games. And John, call it back up. Let's go ahead and get Campbell out of the way. We're going to give everybody a free one on Campbell. Because if that game is not in the win column at the end of the year, I'm not sure what the rubble will look like at Inside Carolina and at Keenan Stadium. So we're going
I
Campbell.
think Taylor wants to see the defense first before he takes that. And,
Well,
and
by
I'm
then,
not
we will
far,
have seen-
I'm not far away from that position myself.
And that's no disrespect to the Campbell Camels. I mean, how cool is that for them to be able to come to Keenan Stadium and play Carolina? So
I will say as well, last year we did the same thing for the Duke game. We just did across the board win over Duke, and we know how well Duke turned out last season. So just throwing that out there.
My pick in that game was the last thing I was thinking about sitting in those stands. I was thinking about having to see this Duke crowd go nuts if May doesn't come through. Let's get it started. Who wants to jump in first on South Carolina, North Carolina, September 2nd, Bank of America Stadium, 7:30 at night. We've heard all the hype, all the game day, all this and that. They kick the ball up for 60 minutes. Who's going first? Am I going to Show Me Taylor or Buck, or who wants it?
It's your call.
I
man.
went first on the over and under, so somebody else go first.
Oh,
this
my
time.
God. Nobody wants it. Taylor, you up.
I'll take the ball first. I think I'm starting the season off with a loss for Carolina. South Carolina has won 7 of the last 9 matchups. They don't return much from their team last year, but the players that do return, they had a win. They closed the year out with 2 wins against top 10 teams. They went toe-to-toe with Notre Dame in their bowl game. I don't think Spencer Rattler is this great quarterback, but with the defense for Carolina, you've seen that they have a tendency to make average quarterbacks look good and good quarterbacks look great. So that's where I'm really hesitant. I think there's concerns for Carolina at receiver. Not even just beyond Tez Walker, because I think it's a concern to see Nate McCullum listed with an or with Kobe Paysour. Either Kobe Paysour has really come on strong late, or Nate McCullum, something's going on there, because all the talk out of camp was that he was the guy. So I'm starting off with a loss. The only reason I would say Carolina wins is because of Drake May, but there's a lot of factors and kind of that show me attitude.
You have fans already, Vip. Get Vip out of here and get Shot. And if you haven't listened to Taylor's breakdown with Jeff Schottmer on the new Shot and Vip show, it could soon be just Shot, with no Vip. But I'm going to do this snake style once we get into it, but I didn't want Buck to have to go first. So I'm going to jump on Jason, since, Jason, you were right there. South Carolina, North Carolina, you can add a percentage. You can put a decimal point, however you want. We just need your pick for Carolina, South Carolina.
So I'm going to go with, and are we doing the 30-second thing here? I think we probably ought to.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Carolina to win this game. I like Carolina in this game. I like the matchup for them for a couple reasons, but I'll say 0.65 likelihood of a win, somewhere in there. But I like them in this game. And actually, here's what's going to be the surprise. I think Carolina wins this game because of the defense.
Hey.
That's going to be where I'm going out on a limb here. And the reason I'm saying that is I think you're going to see a lot of packages where Elijah Huzzy is in the slot and is handling coverage there. And I think the 3 corners they're going to put on the field are going to be able to do something that Carolina's had trouble doing for the last few years, really, and that's cover people. I think those 3 guys are going to do well in coverage, and I think they're going to be able to limit some of what Rattler's able to do And I think they'll be able to make him uncomfortable as a result. So I think Carolina wins, and I think this will be a game where the big surprise is that it'll be the defense that leads the way.
Okay. Jason picks Carolina to win on the back of the defense. Scott Dawson in the chat says over under on how many times Jason switches his picks.
Over. Wait, under.
This can't be a Waffle House show tonight.
Buck, you're up. Carolina, South Carolina.
Tommy, you can't win them all unless you win the first one. So you can't go with 12-0 unless you pick UNC in the South Carolina game. The SP Plus ranks North Carolina's defense, I think, 57th. Is where they've got UNC's defense projected. If that's true, I think UNC wins, and I'm going to go with that assumption. And so if I'm wrong, we'll blame ESPN SP Plus.
Greg Barnes, the numbers guy. And if you haven't, just a tease for after this, if you're listening to the audio version of this show sometime Thursday morning, stay tuned. After we finish here, it'll roll straight into Next Level. Greg and I did a show with Brian Vimo, or Fremo. How do you pronounce his name? Fremo, that's it. And he is all about the numbers. He actually had South Carolina winning based on the numbers as well. But Greg, your pick for South Carolina, North Carolina.
Yeah, this is one of those games where it's probably going to be sloppy, and I don't know how much we'll learn about either team. South Carolina only returns 10 players. They lost some key pieces off the offensive line, which wasn't really that good last year anyway. And they brought in some G5 pieces to replace it. They do have two really good wide receivers, Juice Wells, and the freshman Nick Harbor is supposed to be just a freak. He's built like a tight end and has track star speed. So it'll be interesting how quickly he hits the ground running. Both those guys have been nicked up. And then Spencer Rattler, when he's good, he's as good as anybody in the country. And when he's bad, he's worse than average. And so that's going to be a lot of it. So I've gone back and forth on this one, and I really do think it's going to be close. I've got Carolina winning this. This is the kind of game I think Carolina has to win. If you lose this type of game, it really just sets things off on a bad foot, and that's not what North Carolina needs this year. I don't think South Carolina's one of the toughest teams that Carolina will play, so I'm not putting too much on this game in terms of what we can learn. I just think Carolina's the better team of South Carolina to get going.
I'm going to agree with Greg Barnes on the first week. I think Carolina's been disrespected so much by the national guys. I mean, I listen to some of the other podcasts that do this stuff and the picks from the national guys, and nobody's given North Carolina much chance, or at least a chance to win. It's always a close game, but with South Carolina winning, Carolina's got Drake May. Carolina's got that chip on their shoulder about that. And I think Mac Brown and his staff have got this team ready. You'd like to see Tez Walker play, but I don't think it matters if he plays or not, because I think what Jason said, the defense is going to play some ball on Saturday night. I'm going with Carolina to win, and if not handily, at least not last possession type game. At least I hope not, because that would be the 10th in the last 2 years. Carolina, North Carolina over South Carolina and Charlotte. John.
I'm going to start off here with a North Carolina loss against South Carolina. I've been kind of keeping an eye on some of the health of South Carolina's skill position players. I think Juice Wells and Trey Knox are projected to play from what we've seen so far, especially Knox at the tight end position. North Carolina struggled at times last season defending against tight ends. I think back to that Notre Dame game when Michael Mayer just went off. I think that's a matchup to watch, and I think ultimately South Carolina pulls it out. I also do want to pull in the Inside Carolina community picks. So we've gotten a ton of responses on this. So it will be my job to kind of give the voice of the Inside Carolina message boards here. The message boards, surprise or not, very positive on the Tar Heels. So you'll see that as we go through the night here. 71.8% of respondents projected UNC to beat South Carolina. And then I'll flip it on over to App State, where 100% of the message board poll responders picked UNC.
Put those numbers in there. That way there's at least two of us on the board with percentages.
I will do that. I will do that. I also do need to say I was the only one to pick App State last year. I'm not doing that again. UNC to beat App State. Tommy, what's your pick in that game?
Injuries are always an issue, especially in, we always talk about the grind of a season. You have injuries late in the season, but you also get the grind of camp, and that can wear on guys. And to clarify, I don't think it matters if Tez plays against South Carolina. I think North Carolina wins anyway. That's the point of that. It certainly matters for the season if Tez plays or not. But against South Carolina in one game setting, I don't think it matters for North Carolina. They're going to whip App State. They're going to blow App State out because, again, like I said about Campbell, if they do not, there's bigger issues than we know about currently. Carolina big over the boys from Boone. Greg, App State, Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, App State was 6-6 last year. Yeah, they beat Texas A&M, but Texas A&M sucked. And so you had a situation where Carolina about choked that one away. And I think people kind of lifted App State up because of that. App State was not a good team, and they lost a lot. And so I agree with Tommy. There's no reason for this game to be close in Chapel Hill.
Taylor Vip.
Yeah, I think this game is going to be a complete blowout for Carolina. App State breaking in a new quarterback who was just a true freshman last year. Hardly played Sun Belt, ACC. Way too much talent to make up for, especially with Carolina being at home.
Jason.
I'm going with Carolina. Again, I think Carolina hammers them in this game, having learned a little respect last year, and I'm going to go with 0.92 percentage here.
Buck Sanders, you are up.
Yeah, I'm going to stay with the crowd. I'm going to predict a win. I'm not going to call for a blowout here, though. I mean, I think it'll be a solid win, maybe 10 points, but I'm not going to say they're going to blow them out of the Kenan Stadium. But I would feel better if their fourth-string quarterback doesn't play. Then, so long as they're not playing their fourth-string quarterback, I think North Carolina will be okay there.
Sanders with the shade.
I took that off of the comment section too, by the way. I forget who I stole that from.
Reference it. I'll go back and do it because you're up. Snake draft, Minnesota. The Golden Gophers and old P.J. Fleck come to Kenan Stadium. I guess what is that, a late afternoon game or a 3:30 game? Might be mighty hot when those Gophers come south. What do you got, Buck?
Well, North Carolina is favored by the SP Plus and by the FPI in this game, but not by much. 3.1 by the SP Plus and 5.5 by the FPI. So I'm going to say with some trepidation that North Carolina is going to beat Minnesota, but this is a game they can lose. But I'm going to call it a win because Minnesota has got a lot to replace in this particular year. They lost a good bit of what they were winning with. They 2 years, 9 wins in both seasons back to back, but they lost a good number of those players. So I'm going with UNC.
Jason, Minnesota comes to Carolina. What you got?
I'm going to go with the better quarterback in this game. I think the teams are basically even otherwise, and I think ultimately Drake May is the difference in this one. So I'm going to go with Carolina, but I think this one is closer to a coin flip. But I'm going to go with a win and make that 0.55. Being home also helps here.
Oh, so neutral field, you'd have Minnesota there based on that number, right?
That'd be basically a pick 'em at neutral. But I think with Drake May, you take him and pick him.
I'm going to throw this up before you make your pick here. And this is why I make my Walker comment against South Carolina. Folks watching in the chat can read it. I 100% agree with it. Taylor, your pick on Minnesota, North Carolina.
Yeah, I'm going Minnesota. I'm not Minnesota. UNC for the same reason as Jason said. Carolina has the home field. I think they have to protect that home field advantage. They have Drake May. Minnesota is a team that wants to run the ball. They're losing their running back and their 3 interior offensive linemen. So everything there has me thinking Carolina wins.
Greg.
Yeah, in terms of what Jason said, yes, Drake May is the better quarterback. I think Minnesota's the better team, though, once you remove the quarterback positions. I mean, Minnesota was a top 25 defense last year. Yes, they lost some key pieces, but they were kind of spread out. I think they lost 2 guys off defensive line, a couple in the secondary, and a linebacker. So it's not like they were just destroyed at any one position. They really like Ethan Kaliak-Manis. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. I butchered it earlier in the year, and I think that's a little bit better. They call him the Greek Rifle. I mean, how about that? That's great.
That's a great nickname.
I really think that Minnesota, as previously noted, won 9 games 2 years in a row. I think they would be getting more hype to win their division in the Big Ten had it not been just for a really difficult schedule within the Big Ten. I think this is a really difficult game for North Carolina to win. And this is where it would be beneficial to go the Jason Staples route of percentages. I'm going to go North Carolina winning this one. Give me 0.51. How about that?
That's what I had it at too, Greg.
Interesting. Carolina wins.
Complete toss-up for me. Yeah.
Carolina wins at home. Drake May makes plays. Somebody at running back has established themselves. I didn't think it would be British, to be honest, but over the last couple of weeks, I think it might be British Brooks. Carolina wins against Minnesota.
For me, I have a quick poll of the group. I'm just curious, who wins neutral field, Minnesota or South Carolina? Because I think that would also be a very close game.
Minnesota.
That's kind of what I was thinking as well. Some of the advanced metrics.
I would say the same thing. Minnesota.
I agree.
Feel that out. And I do think it's interesting, too. There's been so much oxygen this offseason about the South Carolina matchup. It makes sense because that's College game day. It's in Charlotte. There's a rivalry there. But don't forget about this Minnesota game. I think this is a very sneaky game on UNC's schedule. And it's at a dangerous point in the schedule, too, just kind of coming early in the year. I'm going with the loss here. So I'm picking Minnesota in this one. And then for the Inside Carolina community pick, this one I see was pretty confident in the Tar Heels. This is a win with 0.894. We're going out to 3 decimal places. Had it as a North Carolina win. Thank you, someone, for breaking the tie. We have, just for context here, we have 189 responses to this poll, so a pretty big sample size. Oh, man. Someone literally just responded. It's neck and neck. 50% win, 50% loss against Pitt for the IC community. So I'll just kind of let that one sit, and we'll update that over the course of the night. For me, this one is a win for North Carolina. North Carolina played really well against Pitt last season, and they had a lot of turnover as well on their depth chart. If you look at it, there's still a lot of seniors on there. So it's still an experienced team, but they did lose a lot from last season. So I think Drake May is the difference in this one. Tommy, what's your pick? UNC at Pitt.
You know, it's funny. Once upon a time, Carolina couldn't lose to Pitt, even when Pitt was good in Larry Fedora. And Mac lost a couple times up there, if my memory serves. I don't know if they've set a game time, but it's not a Thursday night, a weird Thursday night in Pittsburgh. This is one of those ones that if I had the percentages that y'all use as crutches, I would probably say a loss.
Ooh, Tommy throwing out the crutch
like
comment.
49.7% chance to win. But I will not use the percentages as a crutch, and I will say a loss for North Carolina at Pitt. I think it's coming off a bye, and I think that's just a troublesome game. Greg, you're up. And for the record, Greg is having to switch between power and headphones on his laptop. So we're starting a petition for Greg to get a new laptop. Greg, your pick, Carolina at Pitt.
Yeah, you guys know I like Phil Narduzzi. I love the guy. He's great. He's proven to be a good coach. I mean, they've won 20 games in the last 2 years. They've won 2 Coastals, won the ACC championship. They really thought Slovis was going to be good enough last year to get them over the hump. I mean, they still went 9-4, but he just wasn't it. And so the defense is going to take a step back. But I think getting Phil Dracovic in gives them a little bit more offensively. And they got some good pieces at the skill positions. They've got 3 returning starters, offensive line. Yeah, they lost some guys on the defensive line. I just think Pitt's going to continue to be a good team. And I said Carolina would win against Minnesota, 0.51. I really think these are both toss-up games. And I think Carolina's going to lose one of them. So since I had Carolina beating Minnesota, I'm going to give Carolina the loss here, 0.49, just to make it fun.
Yeah, people forget who was quarterback for Boston College a couple of years ago when they gave Carolina trouble up there. I don't know if Pitt doesn't have a mammoth tight end that catches everything, right? Maybe they do. But anyway, Taylor, Pitt game.
Yeah, I actually thought Pitt played North Carolina pretty tough last year. They were up 10 points, and then Carolina scored on 4 of their last drives to kind of put them away. They lose talent on defense, but it feels like they reload every year, and Narduzzi has a pretty good sense of what kind of identity his team wants to play with, and they kind of hit that mark every year. So I have Carolina losing this game.
Jason Staples. I have a feeling that I know what Jason's going to say. Let's see.
Go ahead and put down what you think I'm going to say.
I think it's dependent on certain guy that plays, but I think you're going to say a loss because we're expecting that guy not to play, and Carolina can't take advantage of it.
That's correct. So I'm going to go assuming Tez Walker doesn't play. Now, Walker is the guy that changes things against how Narduzzi likes to play so much one-on-one coverage. With Tez Walker, I think they probably win this game or have a better shot for sure, because he's going to beat that quarters type stuff, the press man or press man match that they like to do up there, deep at least once, maybe twice. A couple scores from him, and all of a sudden you've got what Carolina got out of that position last year. I think it's going to be hard, and for a lot of the same reasons as Greg, I gave him the benefit of the doubt against Minnesota at home. On the road against Pitt, I think it makes sense to put this as a loss and make it 0.45.
Buck Sanders, you're up. At Pitt and then at Syracuse to follow that. Buck is muted.
I'm not allowed to say it. I wasn't allowed to say it.
Honest to God, I thought I had it written down. I wish I could send you the screenshot that North Carolina was going to lose this game. I had picked Pitt. And y'all have talked me out of that position. Now, they return less than half of their 22 production on defense and just a tick over half on offense. Their returning production is 119th in the nation. They lost 6 high-caliber starters and the ACC Defensive Player of the Year in Cansey. North Carolina beat them in Keenan by 18 points last year. And to see you rummies just cave to Pitt and Narduzzi just because Greg Barnes has this love affair with Pitt and Narduzzi, I can't handle it. I'm gonna have to find a loss somewhere place else because I have them at 9-3. But y'all completely blew my entire scheme, so I'm going to pick UNC to win.
Never thought I'd see the day that Buck was swayed in the opposite direction by this group. I love it. I love feisty Buck. Just like I've said before, I love feisty Mac. When Mac gets feisty in his press conferences, feisty Buck's great. Now you got Syracuse coming to Kenan Stadium. Buck, you're getting on your way. You
Well,
close
they're
to
going to
being
beat
on your way.
Syracuse. If they don't beat Syracuse, they should just pack in the rest of the season. There's nothing else to say about that. They should beat Syracuse.
Jason, what you got? Carolina Q's.
That's a win. I'm going to give Carolina 0.85 on that one.
Taylor.
Yeah, this has to be a convincing win.
Greg.
God, I don't see it being convincing. Just going through all the Syracuse numbers, I think Carolina should win, so I'm going to go with Carolina winning. And yeah, Sean Tucker's gone. I didn't know they brought in Rocky Long. How about that as defensive coordinator?
It's still
but-
Syracuse.
I know, but I mean they were 7-6 last year. I mean they lost by 6 at Clemson. Yeah, they got smoked by Florida State, but they played Pitt close up there. Played Wake close in Winston. I think should be a pretty good team. So I think this will be a dogfight, but I got Carolina winning it.
Back on the winning ways, Carolina beats Syracuse and Kenan. John?
For me, both of these next two games right here are one-score games, and I think that's a theme for me when I look at this schedule. Last year, UNC played 9 one-score games. They got off to a 6-0 start in one-score games, and then they dropped their last 3 against Georgia Tech, NC State, and then the bowl game. I think it's going to be another one of those types of seasons with a lot of games. And something we talked about last season on these shows is Drake May in those one-score games. I think we floated around the old Bug Howard quote, I turn 50-50 balls into 80-20 balls. I like that phrase, but turn it to Drake May with these 50-50 games. Drake May and how good he is, he turns those games into 80-20 games. So for me, both of these next two games, I think they will both be very close, but I've got UNC winning both of them. In terms of the Inside Carolina community picks, first of all, I feel like Steve Kornacki a little bit. We've got some votes out there still. The Pitt game, that's literally 1 vote away. So if you want to go in and vote and change that, I'll go update it here. With respect to Syracuse, again, Inside Carolina is extremely optimistic. Let's see, 0.99. I don't even think we need to go any farther than that. And then against Miami, slightly more conservative, but still 7.743. So nearly 3/4 of poll respondents from the Inside Carolina community picked UNC to beat Miami at home. Tommy, your pick for UNC versus the Hurricanes?
This is a game. This game and the South Carolina game, to me, are the difference between 10-2 and 8-4. I think. I think that Carolina can beat Miami. I think that at some point, Miami's going to get one of these wins. I don't know if it's this year, and I can't seem to find the way to pick Miami in Kenan Stadium when they've found multiple ways to not win in Kenan Stadium over the years. I'm going to go with a win for Carolina. Drake May has another big day, and I mentioned him earlier. I put him up on the screen if folks were listening and not watching. Kobe Paysor has another big game. Greg?
So I just want to say this with the IC community picking Carolina to beat Syracuse at a 99% clip. That equates to about a 20-point money line. So you're by saying that, you're saying Carolina's going to win by 3 touchdowns.
I should mention there could be all these people picking them to win by 2 points, so it's not a perfect science here. If there was a statistician on this call, they'd say it's not a good sample of data here.
Biased sample.
Exactly. Yes. But yeah, go ahead, Greg.
That's a high mark. Regardless, that's a lot of people picking Carolina to win that game. All right, so we're at the point now. I've got to start finding some losses. And I mean, why not Miami, right? I mean, Miami's always does so well comparative to preseason expectations. But Miami returns like 20 starters. Got a new offensive coordinator who maybe can do some things with Tyler Van Dyke, who we saw him to be pretty good 2 years ago before just flaking out last year. I do think Mario's a pretty good coach. I know Jason's probably biting his tongue as I say that. I don't think he's elite, but I think he's a pretty good coach. And I think he's going to get things turned around down there. And as I said, I've got to find a loss here or there. And so I'm going to go with Miami still in this one in Chapel Hill.
No, put loss there instead of Miami. Taylor, you're up.
Yeah, I have the win streak against Miami going to 5, and I'll tell you why not Miami, Greg. Mario Cristobal is a fraud. He is a fraud. He hides behind the I have to get my players into the program and kind of throws everybody under the bus. It's this offensive coordinator, it's this defensive coordinator. Well, those guys lost to Middle Tennessee State last year as a 28.5-point favorite. Miami is this is another one. Miami is gonna have to show me they could beat North Carolina before I pick Miami to win. It kind of goes back to the point. I think some people have a legit complaint about Mac Brown, where Mac Brown is gonna win you the offseason. Every time he talks, he fires everybody up, but it kind of leaves a little bit to be desired with where they're recruiting. I think Mario Cristobal is the poorest man's version of that complaint with Mac Brown. So I have Carolina.
It's a lot of love.
It might not even be a big win, but I have Carolina.
And where do you live?
The 305.
Yeah, you better change the name. And these are YouTubes, so that somebody's gonna come for you. Jason, who you got? Carolina, Miami.
This is a tough one for me. Because, I mean, it's really hard to pick Carolina to lose to an FCS program, especially at home. But I do think this year's Miami team, interesting question is going to be how much the fraud allows Shannon Dawson in terms of leeway as an offensive coordinator this year. Because Miami, I think, is going to be strong on both lines of scrimmage. Offensive line, they've got some players. I mean, the center they just got from UCF might be the first team All-ACC center. They might have the most talented offensive tackle in the conference, and they're new freshmen, but they're young. A couple of those guys, and defensive line, they're going to be really good. So, and then I think Van Dyke, if you put him in a competent offense, in terms of coordination, he's shown he can be accurate. He can do a lot of things. So this is a dangerous team, even though they are Miami, and even though they are coached by Cristobal. I think this is a very, very dangerous game. I think this is pretty close to a coin flip. All told, if Carolina has Tez Walker out there, I think I'd favor Carolina. Operating under the assumption that he doesn't play in this game, which right now things were going today, he wouldn't play. I'm going to go with Carolina losing to an FCS program in Miami in this game with a 0.49. I think this is one of those games that could go either way, but I'm going to favor the team that I think is stronger on the line of scrimmage. And, they're good enough at quarterback if they're in a competent, coordinated offense to be really dangerous.
FSU guy picks Miami to beat North Carolina. And I don't necessarily disagree with you, even though I picked Carolina to win. Buck, you're up. You got Miami, and then you got the Virginia Cavaliers.
Well, I'm going to pick Miami, but it's not my fault. I was forced into this pick because of the Pitt situation. And, I had decided that North Carolina was a 9-3 team. That's what I'd made my mind up, that it was a 9-3 team. So after I had to change my pick on Pitt, I had to find another loss, and it just happens to be Miami. So, end of story. I'll take Virginia, UNC over Virginia big time. They're going to clobber Virginia.
Jason, you got your pick and your percentage.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Virginia loses this game. So Carolina wins pretty handily. I think Virginia's got a long way to go, and I'm not sure they'll do it under this coaching staff. I'm going to go with Carolina wins this game with a 0.9. Let's see, a 0.90 win probability.
It's kind of amazing how a good coordinator doesn't always translate to a good head coach. Taylor, Virginia, North Carolina.
Yeah, they're breaking in a new quarterback this year, transfer from Monmouth. This kind of holds with my trend that I think Carolina is going to be pretty good at protecting their home field advantage. I have Carolina winning.
Greg, Carolina, Virginia.
Yeah, the game was way too close last year. Tony Muskett is the guy that Taylor's talking about from Monmouth. He beat out a true freshman who wasn't very highly touted. So just a dumpster fire at the moment offensively for Virginia. Defense should be okay again. They were solid last year. But you got to at least be serviceable on one side of the ball. Virginia is not. Carolina is going to win this one.
Yeah, you can win games 50-49. You're not going to win them 6-3 much this day and age. I think Carolina gets a good win against Virginia, gets some of the guys that we've talked about need to play some action in this one, along with that App State game earlier in the year. Carolina over the Hoos. John B.
It's nice going at the end here. I can kind of bundle my talking points together. So I think at this point, it's a good time to talk about the ghost of the bad loss, especially in this Mac Brown 2.0 era. There have been some bad losses over the seasons. You can kind of go down the list each year. I think last year the bad loss was definitely against Georgia Tech. I think that's something to keep an eye out for in these games. So there's a little bit of a danger area here. It's a little bit of a softer point in the schedule as well. Mac Brown has talked about already, this is the toughest end to the schedule. A quote along those lines. He's already circled that last 3 games. So I think there's a danger zone here. With that being said, I'm going with a win in both games here. But maybe I'd give maybe that Georgia Tech one, maybe a 0.6 if we were doing that. The Inside Carolina community does not share any of my concerns. They are confident that the win is going to be a large one against Virginia. And then at Georgia Tech does not phase the Inside Carolina community. There's a 0.912% winning percentage there. So Inside Carolina, very confident. And I should call out, thus far, the Inside Carolina community has North Carolina at 9-0 to start the season. So I love it. Tommy, did you go in and fill out all these polls in here yourself?
Nice. No. I'm not sucking. No, you're not sucking me into that again. I've already taken that off the table earlier. I think at Georgia Tech is one of those great point about the bad losses, but I don't think it happens this year. Carolina, Mac talks a lot about being good to great and all that, and then you have a guy like Nate McCollum. Even if he never stepped foot on the field, he can sort of give some insight into that Georgia Tech team, and that helps Carolina. I asked him when he was on the Players Lounge early in the year, how did you guys beat North Carolina 2 years in a row? He's like, I don't know, man. They came to play and Carolina didn't. I do not think that happens again, even though we're starting to get at this point in the season where guys are tired, guys are beat up. But Carolina does not lose again at Georgia Tech. If they do, there's systematic problems that won't be fixed by the current setup. Greg.
Nobody's mentioned, their savior this year, Haynes King. He was phenomenal in the SEC. I think he's destined for greatness in the ACC. Brent Key had a good run after he took over for Jeff Collins last year. I think it's way too early to determine if he's actually a guy that can get the job done. I think Carolina, understanding just how embarrassingly bad they have played Georgia Tech the last 2 years. If Carolina doesn't win this game, then that just speaks wholeheartedly for me to a culture issue that's rotten to the core, because They were embarrassed in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz 2 years ago. They led 17-zip last year. Drake May was a Heisman candidate at the time. Carolina was pushing for a top 10 ranking, and they crapped the bed. I mean, call it what it was. And if you can't bounce back and do better than that and really make a point in this game, I mean, if this game's not circled as one of the most important of the year, I kind of question what you're doing. So I think Carolina takes care of business here.
Taylor Vipolis, Carolina at Georgia Tech.
Yeah, I had the same thought as Greg, that this is as close to a must-win game for Carolina as it can probably get. You look at the past 2 years, you lose to a team that's transitioning away from the option, and when a team is moving away from the option, that's supposed to take multiple classes for them to build a competent and a team that should challenge a team like Carolina, who is recruited just as well as anybody in the country. I think, Greg, you put out the overall talent tweet today back on Twitter. I think Carolina has a top 10 team, right, in terms of talent?
Well, I think they're number 17 nationally this year.
Okay, so a top 20 team. Yeah, Georgia Tech is a team that Carolina has to beat.
Jason, you're up with your pick and percentage. And Sherelle McMillan dropped by in the chat, says Atlanta is a UNC nightmare. And it's that way in both sports, or in a lot of sports. It's ridiculous. I guess it's the varsity tears everybody's stomach up.
Or the traffic.
Or the traffic. Well, you can just helicopter in and land in Mercedes. But, Jason, who you got here in this one? This is one that Carolina's got to win.
Yeah, I've got Carolina winning this game. Keon White, the defensive lineman they had last year, who was just an absolute stud and wrecked shop against Carolina's offensive line. He's not walking through that door. He's playing for the New England Patriots, who somehow managed to get him in the second round, which is just absurd to me. But anyway, he's not walking through that door. I think Carolina should be able to win this game. I'm going to go with 0.85% win percentage. Nice number here for Greg Barnes. Mentioned the dominance of Haynes King in the SEC. Any guess on the success rate of Haynes King on dropbacks last season?
I'm not going to disrespect the kid, but it's brutal.
It wasn't good. The success rate on dropbacks for Haynes King, and remember, he's playing with a pretty talented supporting cast, even though very young, was 42.4%. So that was a 58% not success rate when he dropped back to pass. And he's not going to be surrounded by more talent at Georgia Tech than he had. So that's he's going to have to show some significant improvement for me to have any confidence in Georgia Tech.
All right, Buck, here you go. You said you got to find some losses. Well, here's a potential one. Where are you going to?
Well, I found one with Miami that I hadn't been counting on. So I've made up the one that y'all forced me into, but I'm still not done talking about Pitt. But everything in me rebels against picking UNC, which I'm going to do, because they just don't win in Atlanta. It's one of those things where Vip was saying if they haven't done it, then what makes us think they're going to do it? Another one of Greg's sayings that he's used over the years. But I'm going to pick UNC to beat Georgia Tech. For the only reason I'm doing this is because I do think, and some of you have alluded to it, that North Carolina is going to have this game circled on their calendar. I think they may be a little tired of getting embarrassed by Georgia Tech. So Duke.
Yeah, Skip Campbell, win across the board. Duke comes to Kenan Stadium. That Duke game last year, Carolina pulled some rabbits out of the hats, and that's probably the number one they pulled out last year. Duke absolutely just said, here, take it. We don't want it. And May made them pay for it. So who you got, Buck? Carolina and Duke in the game I think should end the season. I'll go ahead and say it. I'm old. Carolina and Duke should be the last game of the season every year. Who you got, Buck?
Yeah, you also have some Duke relatives running around in your bloodline, so that's explains part of that. Um,
Shh.
I'm going to pick UNC in this one too, and I think Mike Elko did a great job last year. They bring back just about everybody. Um, this should be a game that should be tight. Although the SP Plus and the FPI, neither one of them thinks this is going to be a close game. Both of them have UNC winning by 10 points. The thing to watch about Duke this year, they had extraordinary turnover luck a year ago. They were plus 16 in turnovers margin last year. And history just tells us that's unsustainable. So I'm going to pick UNC, even though in the UNC Duke game, Duke didn't get an advantage there on turnovers, but I still think this is a win in Keenan for UNC.
Jason, what you got? Buck makes a great point. Carolina was successful in those one possession games. Duke had such a positive turnover margin. Can it continue for the Blue Devils? How's this game shake out?
Well, I don't think it's going to be a one-score game, so that part will probably not really be tested here. I think Carolina is going to win this game. I really like Elko. I like that coaching staff that they have there. I think Riley Leonard is one of the best quarterbacks in the conference. I just don't have any confidence in the supporting talent, the skill talent around him to be able to score enough points to match what I think Carolina is going to be able to do against their defense with Drake May. So I think it boils down to a win. I'm going to go 0.88.
Very confident. Taylor Viplis.
Yeah, I agree with Jason that I really like Elko. I really like Riley Leonard. They win 9 games last year, but you look at their schedule last year compared to this year. This year, it's Clemson, Florida State, Notre Dame, NC State, and North Carolina. The only team they played last year from that bunch is North Carolina. So I think that this is going to be a more of a prove-it year for Duke, that what Elko started to build last year was sustainable. So I have Carolina winning this game.
Great
And if you have season tickets to UNC, that's a 7-0 home record.
Nice.
Nice,
Yes,
yeah.
it is. Yeah, so no excuses not to have your season tickets and be there to see all 7 wins, according to Taylor. Go ahead, Greg Barnes, Carolina Duke.
Yeah, I'm just going to build on what everybody else has already said. Give Elko a lot of credit. They went 9-4 last year. He's got 18 starters back. I agree about Riley Leonard. I think he's really good. They have to replace their right guard and otherwise have all 10 starters back on offense.
Well, Eli Pancol got hurt as well, the wide receiver. He's out,
Right.
might not return this year, so that's down to 9 now.
Yeah. But if you look at kind of what transpired last year schedule-wise, it really worked out for them. I mean, they where's the number here? So they beat Temple, who had a losing record. They were 3-9. They beat Northwestern, 1-11. They beat NCA&T, of course, is FCS. They lost to Kansas, who started good but ended up having a losing record. They beat Virginia, who stunk. They lost to Georgia Tech, who had a losing record. They beat Miami, who had a losing record. They beat Boston College, who had a losing record. They beat Virginia Tech, who had a losing record. You got to get all the way down to the end of the year when they beat Wake Forest on Thanksgiving weekend. And that's when Wake Forest has started to tank a little bit for them to get their first win against a team that finished the year with a winning record. And of course, they beat UCF in the bowl game. So they really just took advantage of a bad schedule. Are they going to be a challenge? Sure. I think they'll be a pretty good team this year. I don't think that's a team that's going to win 9 games again. And so because of that, I think with it being in Chapel Hill, Carolina will win this one.
It'll be an interesting game, I guess, on Labor Day night, Monday night, Clemson and Duke. Yep. And it'll be interesting to see how Duke can handle Clemson and vice versa. I think Carolina beats Duke in Kenan Stadium. For me, that's 7-0 at home too as well. Happy times in Kenan Stadium this year. Producer John Make your Duke pick, make the IC pick, and then I got to talk about Johnny T-shirt.
Mm.
I think at this point, I start to think about sort of how the season would be going up to this point. Drake May would be all over the Heisman buzz if UNC's record is what it is and he's played like he did last season. There would be a lot of pressure on this football team. And also, I go back to my one-score games. I think this is one of those that has the potential to be a one-score game, given all of the returning production that we've talked about with Duke. So I'm picking this one as a loss for North Carolina. IC
Wow.
community pick. This one is also not that close. 0.919. That's kind of cool. The area code here. UNC winning that one.
Can we just
Tommy?
can you change the heading there to Tommy Ashley Fan Club?
Wow.
They drank some of Tommy's Kool-Aid. Let
Let's,
him in the pantry.
Yeah, I'm going to drink Johnny T-shirt Kool-Aid right now and talk about them. I said it earlier. I say it every time we do these shows. You guys need to support local. Go to Johnny T-shirt either on Franklin Street or online and check them out. And everybody in here, raise your hand in the chat if you're an Inside Carolina Premium member. If you're not, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, the evidence could not be more clear for you to get on that bandwagon and that gravy train, because it's a gravy train of information. But Johnny T-shirt gives you 10% off if you're a member. All the swag you need for Carolina, jerseys, NIL stuff, whatever you want. Take care of them. And most importantly, locally owned alumni folks, they need your support. Take care of them. The national guys will pay the bills for the audio version. We'll be right back. 2023. Shout out to the 500 plus in here watching a bunch of dudes pick college football games. We'll be right back. Okie doke. I probably should have taken that break a lot earlier. It just happens to come in the brutal part of the schedule for North Carolina. John, I'm going to let you continue the inside community picks with Clemson. At Clemson, after that Duke game, tough rivalry game, Carolina travels to Clemson, to Death Valley, which is a game I hope to go. I've never seen a game there. How did IC pick it? How do you pick it?
First of all, up to 198 respondents to the poll. So thanks everyone for contributing to this. UNC projected with its first loss by the Inside Carolina community. No faith in the team in a tough road matchup against a very good Clemson team. UNC, anybody want to pick the percentage or guesstimate the percentage of people who picked a win?
0.07.
Close. It was 11%. So I'll put down the 0.116 there. Not a whole lot of faith. So we have our first loss on the board for the IC community picks. I've talked a lot about tonight about our one-score games. I think this is the only game on the schedule that UNC and you never want to say cannot win, but this is one where I think they are heavily the underdog. I think everything else on the schedule is within reach. But when you look at what Clemson has done as a program, I think they are a tier above UNC. So I'm picking a loss here. Give UNC thus far for me 4 losses on the season. Tommy, what's your pick? UNC at Clemson.
Greg, what was the last time Carolina went to Death Valley?
It was 2014.
Yeah, was it 14 or it was 14 when Deshaun started.
Yeah, and so it's been a while. I think this is a game Carolina could win if everything broke right. But at this point in the season, and where this game is, it's one part of the schedule I agree with Mac about. This is a brutal stretch run for North Carolina, going to Clemson, playing Duke, going to Clemson. Clemson's going to be in the thick of the playoff race. They're going to need a win. Carolina, we'll see what they're doing. I have them as a one-loss team. It could be a monster game down in Death Valley. And, oh, boy, if it's at night down there, what an atmosphere. But I'm going to go Clemson with the win, 10 points-ish. I don't think it's a runaway by any stretch of the imagination. But, Greg, what you got?
Yeah, I think the fact that Clemson returns a lot of players, returns 15 starters. We'll see about Cade, right? I mean, that's the name of the game. Clemson will be, I think, elite defensively. And just looking at their schedule, I mean, they get Florida State at home. So if they can take care of business against the Seminoles in middle of September, then they get Notre Dame at home in November. I mean, you beat Notre Dame, and then all of a sudden you're talking about the college football playoff and all those kind of things when Carolina comes to town. And I think at that point, with my win-loss for Carolina, with 2 losses already in the ACC, Carolina's out of it. And so maybe that gives them a little bit of an underdog role where they can benefit from. I just think by that time of the year we'll know a lot more about Cade, and I think Clemson's ready to kind of handle business. I think this will be a big year for them, and I think it's just too big of a challenge for Carolina. So I have Clemson winning this one.
Is Cade good, or did Carolina's defense make him look good?
That's a great question. It's a great question.
Who you got, Taylor?
I have Clemson winning this game. I actually think Clemson, this is the year they get back into the playoffs. I think they're I really like them bringing in Garrett Riley and what he could kind of do for their offense after watching what he did last year at TCU. It's going to be, I think last year at the ACC championship game, people kind of saw how big that gap still is between Carolina and Clemson. So I have Carolina losing that game.
Jason Staples currently sitting with 2 losses at Pitt and Miami at home. What you got, Carolina, Clemson?
So you know this, Tommy. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, if you remember, when we were going to and fro from practice, that I was fully prepared to pick Carolina to beat Clemson in this game. But with Tez Walker out, I don't think they've got the weapons. I think that's a huge difference. If you're going to beat Clemson, you have to have dudes. You have to have playmakers out wide that are going to cause problems for the way that they play a lot of single coverage. You look at what Wake Forest did to them last year with those huge receivers and the way that they came very close to beating Clemson just because they kept throwing verticals and hitting those. That's the way that Carolina could do it. But without, if Tez Walker doesn't play, I don't think Carolina can do it. I think, Clemson's defense is going to be really, really good this year. I'm very wait and see on how good Clemson's offense is going to be this year. I think they're vulnerable. They may be a 3-loss team this year. And that's despite, I think Garrett Riley's a really good coordinator. I think, Cade Klubnik is a good prospect. I'm just not sure that Clemson has the playmakers out wide that they've had in the past. You look at, they're going to depend, we know Antonio Williams is pretty good, but he's not, Sammy Watkins or Nuke Hopkins or T. Higgins or one of those guys. And then once you get past him, you're looking at Bo Collins. I mean, Jake Brenningstool. I mean, who's going to be, and they've got a couple guys that are young prospects that could step up and become really good players. But I don't see the elite playmakers they have. And I do think that makes them, this is a game Carolina can win. I'm not willing to pick them to win without Tez Walker, but I'm going to say this is closer than the experts think, as Lee Corso likes to say. And I'm going to go with Clemson with winning this one, but Carolina with a 0.4 chance of winning the game.
Buck Sanders, you've got at Clemson and you've got at NC State. I heard your final record prediction earlier, so where are you on these 2 ball games?
Well, if you've heard and paid attention, I've got them both as losses. So don't hate me, comment people, or you probably should hate me. But anyway, Clemson, I just don't believe that North Carolina is going to beat Clemson until I see them do it. So that's the end of the story there. The NC State game, either way, that's a very, I guess, a divisive game among the experts because the SP Plus has got UNC winning by less than a point, and the FPI has NC State winning by 0.1. I mean, how much closer can you get? But I do think that, the last time we saw Robert Anae and Brennan Armstrong play together or work together on a team, Anae being the OC, Armstrong being the quarterback, they threw the ball all over UNC. The difference is that NC State's going to have a defense, and they always have had a defense. Last year, they had a top 20 defense. So I think that combination of offensive coordinator and Brennan Armstrong slinging the ball, they're not going to be able to run it very well, but with a defense, which is something Virginia didn't have at the time, I expect NC State to win. Sorry.
Jason's.
Yeah.
But
So
with the apology, Jason, what you got?
this is another really close one. I think Robert Anae is a really, really good offensive coordinator, and obviously we saw what he did with Brennan Armstrong at Virginia. That was frightening at times, really efficient. I'm not sure NC State has the weapons to put up quite the mismatches that you're terrified of in the passing game. And Buck, you said it. I don't think they're going to be able to run it quite as well this year as they had, in prior years, and they didn't run it quite as well last year even. And I think Carolina's pass defense is going to be. I think Carolina's going to be able to cover a lot of people pretty well next year or this year, I guess. I think Carolina's going to have some success in the secondary. I'm going to go with Carolina to win this one close in Raleigh. Go with Carolina with a 0.56 win probability here.
A lot of toss-ups going on in there for Jason, for everybody, really. Taylor, who you got? Carolina, NC State.
Yeah, I think the storyline here, besides the fact that it's a rivalry game, is that it's Drake May's last regular season game, most likely with him heading off to the NFL draft. In all likelihood, he's probably going to be a top 5 pick. So with that being said, I do think this is a toss-up game. The two teams play each other pretty close almost every year. I have a rule: if a game is 50-50 and one of those teams is NC State, I'm not picking them, so I have Carolina.
Greg Barnes, what you
Great
got?
rule.
The other storyline here is Mac is what? And he's 7-7 against NC State as Carolina's head coach. That's a pretty big thing. Look, I agree. I think this is a true toss-up. If I could pick a tie, I'd pick a tie. I think having a good quarterback is going to make a world of difference for NC State. I mean, they won 4 games with different quarterbacks last year. That's impressive. And I know that defense was elite last year, and they lose some key pieces. But I think Battle and Aiden White, are up there for the top cornerback duo in the ACC. They have some good pieces up front. So I think, Gibson, he's done a good job. He'll continue to do a good job. I think it's a really tough game for North Carolina to win. And I really go back and forth. Is Carolina 8-4? Are they 9-3? I think Carolina is a better team than they were last year. I think last year some things broke in their favor. They were 6-3 in games decided by 7 points or less.
Oh, that's Greg setting up a loss here.
Yeah, and I've been going back and forth, Jason. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick Carolina to win this game. I do think it's a toss-up. So that puts me at 9-3. I am right there on the line between 8-4 and 9-3 though for this team.
You saw my percentages. If you add them up, came out to 8.5 on the nose. So we are right on. We are right with each other here.
What was the
win total is?
I was going to say, what is the Vegas win total at 8.5? Yeah. So,
and I think the over is even or plus money.
I didn't know that, but yeah, I mean, if I were setting the over under on this, it would be 8.5.
It is amazing to me what expectations will do to a fan base. As Max said multiple times, they won 9 games last year. It matters how the season ends, but they won 9 games. That Carolina's done it less than a handful of times since he left. They can't lose to NC State. If Mac and this crowd lose to NC State in Raleigh again after the last 2 years, there's trouble on the hill in a major way. I just think they get it done. Drake May makes plays, and who knows who's healthy at that point in the season. You know, State's defense. You know, Peyton Wilson in his 17th year. He might have aged out by then and not be playing. He's missed the game a couple times, but at this point in the year, it starts to be toss-ups. I'm going to take the best quarterback, and I'm going to follow Vip's rule. If it's close, I'm not picking NC State.
Tommy, how's this for a stat for this rivalry though? In the last 24 games, and this is a Phil Steele stat. Last 24 games, the underdog has won straight up 14 times.
Wow.
Wow.
They throw out the records, throw out all that kind of stuff. The way Carolina lost 2 years ago, and I will never forget sitting there after that field goal, everybody in the Carolina section is going nuts. I'm like, this game's not over. It is not over. Sit down or cheer or whatever, but it is not over. And here we are 2 years later, and they lost twice in rough fashion. Not this year, though. Producer John, close us out with your picks, and then I'll wrap us with a little bit extra.
I want to do a quick recap for those on podcasts as well. So thus far, Buck Sanders, Jason Staples, Taylor, and Greg all have UNC at 9-3. Tommy Ashley is the only one to go out a little bit higher than that and pick UNC at 10-2. For me, quick NC State story. They landed a transfer wide receiver commit from Rice, Bradley Rosner. He is entering his 8th season in college football. And for context, he entered college the same year as me, which is absurd. I have not stepped on a campus in a long time, and he is the same age as me, and he is still playing college football. So that's just absurd. Just
John's got grandkids. That kid's still playing
exactly,
college.
yeah.
Tez Walker somehow can't play.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I don't know how that works, but that is a funny NC State story. Also, with my pick here, I am going to mention something we have not mentioned very much tonight. Kind of surprising that I haven't heard this mentioned. The offensive line for North Carolina. If you put on the tape from last year, NC State and Georgia Tech, especially the last two regular season games, Drake May was under duress. He was under attack from those two defensive lines. I think that's a major concern for me heading into this season. That's part of the reason why I have UNC with 4 losses, but I am not picking a 5th. I think UNC beats NC State, so I'm going to put their record at 8-4. I don't know if NC State will have enough depth, at this late in the season. IC community picks. NC State is a win with 0.797% of the votes. So IC community has UNC at 11-1.
Realistically, think 2023. Somebody in the chat asks, does 6-2 get them into the ACC championship game? I do not think so.
Not if one of the losses is to Clemson.
Valid, and that is without divisions. 7-1, 8-0, 7-1 is probably there, unless, like Jason said, they end up beating Clemson.
Yeah, I think 6-2 gets you there if you beat Clemson. If Clemson's in a situation where Carolina beats him, that's probably Clemson's second loss in conference, and then I think that puts you in probably puts you in the title game. But I don't think you get there if you lose to Clemson and another ACC game.
All right, Buck, I'm going to sort of close this out. I'm going to ask a question. You're muted again. Gotcha, twice.
I am not finished talking about Pittsburgh, and I blame Pittsburgh on the mute button issues.
I want you to talk about Pittsburgh, but I also want you to give me your best case, worst case scenario for North Carolina before we get out of here, and everybody's going to do it.
My closing thought on Pitt is, and Greg Barnes can answer this question, who is their brand new offensive coordinator there under Pat Narduzzi?
Is he brand new? Did Cignetti leave? No, Cignetti's back.
No, he wasn't there last year, was he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he was.
Yeah, last year was his first year.
Last year was his first year. Year behind.
But you know that he also was an offensive coordinator at UNC.
Fantastic. Yeah. In
Did
06,
you know
is that
that?
right? Was that the Joe Daly year?
That was '06. Yes. And one of his offenses against Virginia got shut out. One of the 3 shutouts since then. So I'm not too enamored with the Signetti Jerkovic or whatever his name is combo there. So
Was that the 7-5 game that Carolina won?
No, that was 05 against Virginia. That was Al Grove.
Oh yeah. That's right. That's right.
yeah, at Virginia, they didn't score a point under Signetti, the genius at Pittsburgh.
He's
Okay,
older now. He's a veteran.
The I think the elephant in the room all night has been, does Tez Walker play or does he not play? And that, I think, is going to make some people here look good and some people look bad depending upon how the season goes. But if Tez Walker's playing, I might change a couple of my picks. All of us would probably change a few things if we knew he was going to play. How sick is that they're still farting around with Tez Walker, and you got guys that, are in their 8th season of college football. So, I think in some ways this, as entertaining as it is and as fun as it is, this prediction show has just have a big cloud hanging over it until we get some resolution on Tez Walker's situation.
Yeah, I think
Absolutely.
Tez Walker is worth like half a win for Carolina this year, just because of what he brings to the table with, pairing with Drake May. So, and that's a lot. I mean, I know some folks who listen to this show who are, handicappers or whatever. No player's worth that much, no position player. Look, I know that's not how that would actually work in terms of the lines, but in terms of the, some of the games on the margin that I think he impacts, I think he makes that big of a difference at the end of the day for Carolina. I think that Pitt game is one of those that I circle as really impacted by whether he plays or not.
Taylor, the thought I've had about the Tez Walker situation is related to some of your teams at North Carolina. That season when Mac Hollins went out about halfway through the year, I forget if it was 2015 or 2016. I think it was 2016. And the offense just sort of seemed to change without that deep threat. I think that's a similar situation here with Tez Walker. And that is a big part of my picks. If Tez Walker is playing, I would probably switch Duke to a win, and I would probably switch Minnesota to win. I think he can make that much of a difference, especially when you look last season at what having an elite target like Josh Downs and Antoine Green, they got open so often for Drake May. Tez Walker could be that guy for UNC if he plays, but we're not sure if he does.
I got a question for you, John. How do you like your crow, fried or boiled?
I'm going to be honest. I am not Southern enough. I do not understand that phrase. I'm going to have to Google that.
Perfect.
I'm going to have to Google
Is
it.
that a Southern thing?
I didn't
feel
think
like
that
I
was a
know.
Southern thing.
Yeah, I know. What that is.
Maybe I'm too young. I don't know.
That is great. That is perfect. Question on the panel, Tar Heel Paul asked, and we need to wrap it up out of here, but the question here is, it seems like most of you started with a general feeling of a win-loss record and then forced the picks to fit. Is that true? For me, I would say yes. What do you say, Greg? I see you nodding.
Yeah, well, there's a reason that Jason made his picks the way he did. And what that is when you look at these games, maybe Campbell is a game where you'll say, yeah, well, Carolina's going to win that 100% of the time. Most games are not that way. Most games, I mean, if you're a touchdown favorite, right, in a game, and you are a touchdown favorite in every game throughout the course of the year, through a 12-game season, you're only going to win like 8 or 9 games because you're going to lose some of those games even though you may be favored.
Yep.
And with there being so many of these that are really toss-up games, I mean, this is a much tougher schedule. Minnesota's good. Pittsburgh's good. Miami should be better. Duke showed last year they're pretty good. At State's always hard. At Clemson's tough. South Carolina on a neutral site in the first game, that's going to be tough. So there's a lot of games here that could go either way. And so that's kind of what you're looking at is when I looked at everything, I said, okay, Carolina's either 8-4, 9-3. So where are some of these losses coming from? And that's why I laid out Minnesota and Pitt. I think Carolina loses one of those two. I don't know which one it's going to be, which is why I went with Pittsburgh because it's on the road. And so you kind of have to find some of those games that are toss-ups if you have a number in mind to kind of make it all fit.
But ceiling for this team.
You know, I think the answer to that is 11-1.
I think that's right.
I don't think there's anybody on their schedule that they can't beat, except for Clemson.
And I think they can beat Clemson if especially if Tez Walker plays. Drake May makes you a threat. He gives you a puncher's chance in every game you play.
Yeah, I think the ceiling is 11-1, and if the UNC defense can take the kind of step forward that the SP Plus says they are, that's doable. That's a doable thing. If they have a defense that's in the top 50, the 50 to 60, somewhere in the 50s, with the offense that they're going to have, I think they could win 11 games. I don't think that's stretching it at all.
A fun thing for folks to listen as far as this, to Buck's point about the offense being good, listen to the next level that follows this on the audio channel. And if you haven't listened to it, go find it on YouTube when you see this and listen to that discussion about how an offense can drag a bad defense along to a certain extent. And he shouted out Southern Cal last year with Caleb Williams. There's a limit to that. I think North Carolina's defense will be better, though. I think they're going to be better. I think year two, if I'm drinking any Kool-Aid, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid that year two is going to be better. I'll say significantly better. I don't know about rankings, but than it was last year, because last year at times it was non-existent. Taylor, you had a point to make.
Yeah, I see.
You want some of your Kool-Aid.
Yeah, I just see fans and some people are calling like even 9-3 being pessimistic. I get why they're saying that. You have Drake May, and like Jason said, with Drake May, you're going to be in every game. But I do think there's a certain part of the fan base that does need to keep some perspective that Carolina has won 9 games in a season twice since 1997. So it's not a program it's a program that might have all the pieces to be a program that wins 9-10 games, but it hasn't been that program. And it's going to be, again, they have to prove that they can do that and that they can build a complete team around Drake May, because right now you have one of the best quarterbacks in college football, but the rest of the team is trying to catch up to that level.
Yeah, and to reiterate something that I thought Greg's column earlier this offseason was excellent on this, and that is, look, if you're going to win double digits, you're going to have double-digit wins in the regular season, you have to blow teams out. You have to have a lot of wins where you're beating teams by 21, 28, 30 points. Because the problem is, if you're playing in one-score games, at some point, somebody's going to drop a ball that really matters, and that's going to, end a drive. Some ball's going to get tipped and returned for a touchdown. Something's going to happen, and you're going to end up losing a game on the margins, just because when the margins get tight, the results are marginal. So the thing that the best teams do, what makes Alabama, and Georgia, isn't that they play at, 100% of their potential every week. The difference is that they play at 80%, and because they, at 100% are going to win that game by 45, 80% gets them a 21-point win, and it's still not in doubt. And what Carolina, if Carolina is going to be a 10-win team this year, they're going to need to come out in the first quarter and that offense just start putting teams away, and the defense start getting immediate stops early in games so that they can start to put teams away and get up by multiple scores early. That's going to be critical. The place where I do think they are going to be improved on defense, I think they're going to be significantly improved in pass defense and in pass coverage in general. I didn't end up getting the time to write the article, But this year, I was planning on writing an article on how last year a lot of fans point to Carolina not being able to or not blitzing enough in the Gene Chizik defense, and that's why they didn't get enough pressure. Here's the thing: when they did blitz, the success rate was really low. So your defensive success rate is not great, right? So when they blitzed, they didn't create enough havoc, and they were weak enough in the secondary that teams took advantage of the one-on-ones, and their success rate and their overall yards per play given up and all of that, it wasn't good enough to warrant blitzing. You have to be good enough in the secondary to actually get the blitz to pay off. I think that's something that is going to change this year, because I like all three of the corners that are going to play a bunch. And I do think that changes some of the calculus for them. The question is whether or not that's going to be enough for them to get up by multiple scores and not play so many one-score games.
Great point about at some point somebody's going to drop a ball. Everybody in the chat hit it, but if you're listening on the podcast, Josh Downs against Georgia Tech.
Yeah, and that's not
to the point.
That's not fair to Josh, because we know how great of a wide receiver he's been, and every single player makes a mistake like that. And the problem is you put yourself in a position where it's a close game, and those types of plays are magnified.
Yep.
Or one holding call that calls back an 80-yard touchdown. One flag changes the entire complexion of that game. If that play counts on that long run from scrimmage on the first play of the offensive series, on the first offensive play of the game, it's 7-0 right there. Carolina might have just rolled in that game. You just don't know what that does to the overall flow of the game. Now all of a sudden you're 1st and 15. You don't get your first down on that first drive. They start with good field position, and now it's game on. One or two plays. Mac Brown likes to say every game is decided by about 5 plays, and he's not wrong. Every game is decided by about 5 plays. Now, if you make the play in all 5 of those plays, you win by 35 points.
Yeah, and and Greg, I get it. It's not fair to Josh. It's 100% not fair. But everybody contributed to making it come down to that.
Right.
And so everybody looks at it and says, well, he dropped a pass. And to your point, he was great all year. The issue with these close games is pressure matters. And when it's so tight constantly, it wears on a team, and then mistakes happen. Jason, I think that holding call, I think it would have been 14-0 or 21-0. I can't remember the exact score in the Georgia Tech game. But either way, to your point, 5 plays a game make the difference. Carolina was on the winning side of most of those last year. We'll see if it goes. Anything left before we get out of here? This has been fabulous. Been 500-plus people in here. We've been going on for an hour and a half now. Folks watching this are asking about South Carolina game. Greg, Jason, and I will be back at it same time tomorrow night for the game plan.
So I'll say something else, Tommy. 2 things. Some really good points made here last couple minutes. To Taylor's point, Carolina was 6-3 in games decided by a touchdown or less last year. They were 3-6 in those same games in 2019 and finished 7-6. That's the margin of error that we're talking about here. The other thing, as Taylor mentioned, Carolina's won 9 games twice since 97. If the fan base is setting expectations that 9-3 should be the floor for this team, and you're going to be upset if anything less than that, I think you're kind of doing it wrong, because you need to be able to enjoy the season. If Mac Brown has shown you anything, is that he's going to do a pretty good job recruiting. And yes, you want to take advantage when you have somebody like Drake May. We all know that. But if you keep building the roster and putting good players in place and letting them grow up and develop, even when Drake May leaves, you're going to put yourself in position to win a lot of games. And if you keep doing that year after year, well, maybe you can find another quarterback that's really good. And then you can take that next step up. But this is only year 5 under Mac. There were 2 losing seasons before he got here. 2019 was kind of a tough year. It's a process. It's going to take some time Do they have potential to have a really good year this year? Yes, for sure. But if you're setting the bar so high that you're going to be upset at what would normally be considered a great year, you're just going to steal a lot of joy in what college football is all about, especially for a program like North Carolina.
So, and I'll throw this graphic up here to underscore your point. This illustrates it, I think, pretty well. This chart, if you're listening on podcast, you'll have to check it out online. But this is wins of 8 points or more, one-score games, and losses of 8 points or more over the last 6 seasons for UNC football. So this, I think, illustrates the point that Jason and Greg were making for the UNC football program.
It's almost a perfect bell curve, which is wild. One last thing. So I just looked up the numbers here. So I mentioned when they blitzed, they didn't have a lot of success. Carolina's havoc rate when blitzing last year. Okay. Just for perspective, the number one team in the country when blitzing in terms of creation of havoc rate was Clemson at 29.3%. Pitt was third at 29.1. Florida State was fifth at 28.3. Louisville was ninth at 27.3. Georgia Tech, 10th at 27.2. So it seems like ACC offensive lines had some trouble last year. North Carolina, anybody have a guess on where they finished nationally in terms of havoc rate when blitzing last year?
10%.
Spoiler rate, we've talked about this on the show before.
It's close. 9.8% last year, which was good for 129th in the country.
Jeez.
Only ahead of USF at 9.3 and Charlotte at 9.5. The next worst were USC at 11.7, Nebraska at 11.7, and Colorado at 11.9. That's not company you want to be keeping in terms of defense on that. That if anybody wants to know why Gene Chizik didn't blitz last year a lot, right there's why. Because when you blitz, you better be able to do something good with it. And if you only create havoc on 9.8% of your blitzes, it's not worth it. You might as well just sit back and try to cover. Now, the thing is, if you've got guys that can cover, if you've got legit corners that are a problem, then that may give the blitz just a little bit more time, a beat more to get home. I think that's the number that changes for Carolina defensively this year. The question is how much. And, you know, if it changes a lot, you know, you get north of, say, even 18%. Let's say you double it and you get into the 70s nationally. All of a sudden, Carolina is a lot more competitive defensively.
Yep, it's going to be what to watch for when Carolina gets it rolling Saturday against South Carolina and Charlotte. Somebody asked, yes, Frothy Beard Brewery on 1200 South Graham on Saturday, 4:30 to 6:30 Inside Carolina Live. Big old tailgate. Shout out to Mike Tester for putting that all together there in Charlotte. Greg Barnes, Jason Staples, and myself tomorrow night, 9 o'clock on the Inside Carolina YouTube channel for the game plan. First one of the season. That'll be an interesting one. And then check out all the rest of the content. If you have not watched Vip's new show with Schottmer, go check it out. It's worth the watch and a listen. Next level audio after this. When we are done, keep watching or keep listening, Check out the YouTube video and just a ton of other content all over on Inside Carolina right now. The season is here. That's Buck Sanders, the president, Taylor Vipolis, producer John Bowman, Greg Barnes, and of course Jason Staples. I am Tommy Ashley. Thanks and shout out to Johnny T-Shirt and all the people that stuck with us tonight. We shall see you guys later.